Good morning, all you folks out there in YouTube land. Thrash Kondo here, and I'm bringing you another one of my newfangled posts on my newfangled laptop. Oh, I'm almost ready for the 21st century. But before I do that, I just want to say like, subscribe, forward, and all the other nice things that I always ask you folks to do. Now, moving forward, I decided I'm experimenting with some new equipment here. But today I figured while experimenting, why not make another one of my world famous vintage comic posts? Those are always fun. So what I did was I made a selection of it's basically a cross reference and a smattering of some of my old comics from late 70s, early 80s when I was really getting to the collecting status. And without further, I'll do. First one I brought out was this one. It's called The Weird. And this was DC's attempt to bring its superhero franchise in a different direction. The stories were a little more gritty and intense. And this was the epic finale of the story, which means somewhere in my collection, I probably have the rest of them, hopefully. Moving forward, another gold key classic. You know how I love those. And this one is a Boris Karloff. And these were always a lot of fun. And this one, it's a the main story is a haunted house take, only instead of ghosts, it's a chameleon creature which can take alternate forms and then grab people as they pass by. What could be more fun than that? This was a slick one. It's called The Echo of Future Past. And these were sort of America's attempt to do a heavy metal magazine. Um, Stories were known for their intensity. I don't want to say adult content, but they tended to sail a little more close to the wind as far as the sex and the violence went. There were some great stories. There were a lot of micro stories that only appeared in one issue, but there were some recurring thread stories which kept you coming back to buy more comics. That Hot House by Brian Wilson Aldiss I'm always talking about. There's a comic book adaptation of that which I found in the old echoes. This was pretty slick. It's called Gobblego. And this was by the same people who brought you Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, as many of you remember, in the early days of Mutant Turtles, they were pretty intense and they had to kind of sand them down as they were marketed to a more of a mass audience. This one was not sanded down. The stories are a bit darker, violence a bit more intense, and again, it was for a more grown-up audience. And as a person in my late teens, I felt as though I was a bit more of a grown up at the time. Of course, they all do. Here's an intense one. It's called Grunts. Now, what this one did was kind of slick. It took war experiences from veterans and did a retelling of their stories in instead of using humans, anthropomorphic characters. I think their idea was to make them a little less disturbing to the comic reading audiences. In some ways, I felt it was maybe it was a little bit more disturbing. But in any event, it saluted veterans who gave so much, and thank you all for your service. And an excellent book as well. Speaking of war comics, this is another one of those blitzkriegs. You remember I did a wretched recap on one of these not too long ago. It's basically the story of the war in Europe, only from the other side. Here we see right out of Western propaganda, we see that big meanie Wehrmacht soldier. Moving forward, this was a cute one. It was called Rick Reagan. Now, Rick Reagan, he was sort of one of those homages to old school Buck Rogers Space Ranger type comics. He had a little sidekick there, little green guy named Quasimodos, which I remember when I was a teenager, I thought was the funniest thing I'd ever heard. And this wasn't meant as a micro series, it just ended up being that way. Only 4 issues were made, which means somewhere I have the other 3. Here's an intense one. Bizarre Adventures. Hate the holidays episode. You could almost extrapolate that from looking at the cover. And they make it very, very, very clear. Not for kiddies. We mean it. Now, it's actually pretty intense. It's not too horrific, but no, it's not a kid's comic by any stretch of the imagination. A lot of your Tales from the Crypt style entertainment in there. Oh, look, we have another gold key. Another Boris Kolos. And in this one, they have an alien which looks like shall we say, a borrowing of the alien monsters from Green Slime, only in this case, it's purple. Purple slime! Will you believe it when you're mauve? I don't know. Oh, and here we have another Echo Future Past. For those of you who were kids back in the 80s, you might remember a short-lived kids cartoon called The Adventures of Bucky O'Hare. The whole story arc got its origins in Echo Future Past. The cartoon adaptation didn't last very long. Again, like always, they had to kind of sand it down for the younger audiences and it made it a little less intense for viewers. Oh, and here we have another Rick Reagan with his friend Quasimodo's, and here some kind of cheap Carolyn Monroe ripoff. So that's two. I probably have the other two somewhere else. Oh, and what better thing to end on than Creepy Magazine's Earth-Shattering Disasters issue? How many of you remember Creepy Magazine? I remember having to like beg my uncles and stuff to buy it for me because again, it was a little intense for kids when it came out. Good. I remember my grandmother found one once and took it away from me. Live and learn, live and learn. Anyway, that's all I got for you today. Be good, be safe, be careful, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all again very, 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 very soon. Oh, and by the way, tonight on ENC's channel, we're going to be doing a live chat on the classic sketch comedy shows of Generation X. And all for now, peace.